You just spent $120 to fill the tank. 26 gallons, gone. And the needle still isn't all the way to full. You climb back into the seat of a truck that cost more than some people paid for their first house, and sitting on the seat next to you is a stack of bank statements you've been quietly avoiding for about 3 months. You already know what's in there. That's the whole reason you haven't opened it. So let me ask the exact question printed on that gas receipt in your hand, the one you keep pushing to the back of your mind. Is this thing actually worth it? Not the horsepower and not the way it looks parked in the driveway. The money. Because a pickup truck almost never drains your wealth in one loud, dramatic moment. It does it the slow, quiet way instead. A little here and a little there, in places that never look like much on their own. So why does the math tell such a different story than the commercials do? Let's open that stack of statements together and actually find out. Here's how this trap actually works, and why it catches good people with good intentions instead of reckless ones. The whole thing is built on a single feeling, the feeling that a truck is practical, that it's the responsible, rugged, do-anything choice a sensible adult makes. You're not buying a toy, you're buying capability. And capability sounds like the exact opposite of wasteful. That one belief is the door the entire trap walks through. Once you've accepted that a truck is the smart, grown-up vehicle, every single cost that follows feels justified instead of questioned. The price feels earned. The payment feels responsible. The gas feels like the cost of being capable. So for the next half hour, let's question all of it, one statement at a time, starting with the very first number you ever signed your name to. The sticker. In 2026, the average price actually paid for a new full-size pickup is sitting right around $66,000. Not the loaded, decked-out show truck on the turntable at the auto show, the average one, the one regular people are signing for every day. And the manufacturer's suggested price on full-size pickups has now stayed above $70,000 for months on end. To feel how heavy that is, compare it to everything else on the road. The average price of any new vehicle in America right now is a little over $49,000. So the typical truck costs roughly $16,000 more than the typical car. You are starting the race $16,000 behind everyone in a sedan, and you haven't even pulled off the lot yet. And notice the language the industry wraps around that price, because the language is part of the machine. They never call it expensive. They call it well-equipped. Heated and cooled leather seats, a screen the size of a small television, a panoramic roof, a trim package with a rugged, outdoorsy name stitched into the headrests. Every one of those features quietly pushed your number higher, and every single one was framed as you treating yourself for being a hard worker who's earned it. That is not an accident. That's the sales script, refined over decades. The truck slowly turned into a luxury vehicle wearing work boots. The price climbed right along with it, and the marketing made the climb feel like a reward you owed yourself. It gets a little worse in 2026 specifically. Prices on new vehicles have been climbing for months in a row, and trucks are leading the charge, partly because buyers keep choosing the biggest, most expensive versions, and partly because tariff uncertainty has been pushing sticker prices up across the board. The people who track this market are blunt about the direction. Whatever a truck costs today, it most likely cost less a year ago, and will probably cost more a year from now. So the trap isn't just expensive, it's getting more expensive while you stand there deciding. Now here's the part most buyers never stop to actually picture. Almost nobody walks in and pays $66,000 in cash. So that sticker price doesn't really live on a window tag at all. It lives on a monthly payment. And the monthly payment is where the quiet draining truly begins, because the payment is engineered to feel small while the total stays enormous. Let me show you the single most expensive mental habit in all of car buying. It's called payment thinking. When you shop by the monthly number instead of the total number, you stop asking, "What does this cost?" and start asking, "Can I cover this month?" Those are completely different questions, and the dealer desperately wants you asking the second one because the second one is easy to manipulate. Stretch the loan, drop the payment, and suddenly a truck you absolutely cannot afford feels like it fits. The monthly number went down. The amount you'll actually hand over went up. That gap between what it feels like and what it is exactly where they make their money and you lose yours. So look at the real numbers. The average new car payment in America right now is about $767 a month, and on a truck, you're very often well north of that. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now carries a payment over $1,000 a month. Sit with that for a second. $1,000 every single month before you've added one drop of insurance, before a single gallon of gas, before you've even decided where you're driving today. That's the cost of the keys simply existing in your pocket. And across the whole country, Americans are now carrying more than $1.5 trillion in auto loan debt. Trillion with a T. We have collectively financed an absolutely staggering mountain of metal sitting in driveways. And to make those payments feel survivable, the dealer reaches for the oldest trick in the entire building. They stretch the loan out. A record share of new car buyers in 2026, almost 23%, are now signing loans of 84 months or longer. 7 years. You will be making payments on this truck until a kindergartner has finished elementary school. The monthly number drops when you stretch it, which feels like a win, and that good feeling is exactly what hides what's really happening underneath. Stretching a loan does not make a truck $1 cheaper. It just rents you the same expensive truck for longer and charges you extra interest the whole way down. On a typical loan, pushing the term from 5 years out to 7 can quietly add a few $1,000s in pure interest. Money that buys you nothing. Money that just evaporates into the lender's pocket for the crime of being impatient. There's a darker corner of this, and it deserves its own light. When people trade in a vehicle they still owe money on, they roll that old leftover balance into the new loan. There's a name for it: negative equity. You're financing a truck plus the unpaid remains of the last car you never finished paying for. And in 2026, around 40% of the new vehicle purchases that involve negative equity are being stretched into those 84-month loans just to force the math to fit. So you don't only owe more than the truck is worth on day one, you have deliberately signed up to owe more than it's worth for years on end. That's not a typo, by the way. Years of making payments on a thing that's worth less than the loan against it, with no way out that doesn't cost you cash. And here's the quiet human cost behind those statistics. A meaningful and growing share of Americans with car loans are now struggling to keep up with the payments. These aren't reckless people. They're people who shopped by the monthly number, got told yes, and discovered too late that yes was the most expensive word in the conversation. The loan didn't free them up, it locked them in. And there's one more room in that building most buyers don't even know they walked into. After you agree on the truck, you get handed off to the finance office, and that's where the real margin gets made. Extended warranties, gap insurance, paint protection, fabric protection, a security package, tire and wheel coverage. All of it offered as a small addition to a monthly payment you've already mentally accepted. None of it feels like much when it's framed as $20 more a month, but every one of those add-ons gets rolled straight into the loan, which means you're now paying interest on the paint sealant for the next 7 years. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, financed, marked up, and quietly stretched across the life of the loan. By the time you drive off, you've often financed thousands of dollars of products you didn't walk in for and will likely never use. That's not the price of the truck. That's the price of not reading the second page. So that's the financing. Most people, when they sit down to decide whether a truck is worth it, stop right there. Payment versus paycheck. But honestly, the payment is the most honest cost of this entire vehicle, because at least you can see it arriving. It shows up, same day, same amount, and you brace for it. It's the costs that never send you a tidy monthly bill that do the real damage to your future. And the first one of those is already sitting right there on your dashboard, printed on that receipt from the gas station. Let's talk about the fuel, because this is the cost you feel in your body before you ever feel it in your budget. A full-size truck with a V8 engine, in the real world and not on the brochure, returns somewhere around 16 to 18 miles per gallon. Some of the newer turbocharged engines do better, climbing into the low 20s if you drive it like you're carrying eggs, but most of America is not driving a crew cab like they're carrying eggs. They're driving it like a truck. And in 2026, gas got expensive again in a hurry. For a couple of years, the national average had settled into the low $3 range, even dipping under $3 early in the year. Then it climbed, and it climbed fast, crossing $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022, with some states pushing well past $5 and even $6, which is exactly how a single ordinary fill-up turns into $120, the same way it did on the receipt in your hand right now. Now run that all the way out, because the monthly fuel number is where it really stings. If you're commuting and running errands and putting normal American miles on the thing, you can easily burn through 2 or 3 full tanks a month. Call it $300, often more, just to keep it moving down the road. Compare that to a sensible car getting 35 or 40 miles per gallon, where the same driving might cost $120 or $150 a month, and you've already found a difference of $150 to $200 a month going up in smoke. And you cannot outdrive the tank. The fuel economy is baked into the metal. You bought a thirsty machine, and it's going to be thirsty for as long as you own it, every single time the needle drops. Now stack that fuel bill on top of a payment near or above $1,000, and you're already cruising past $1,300 a month. You haven't insured it yet, you haven't fixed a thing on it yet, and you're already over $1,300 to drive to work and back in a vehicle whose towing capacity you will use roughly never. Hold tight to that last point, because we are circling back to it, and it's the part of this whole story that still doesn't quite make sense. Then the insurance bill lands in the mailbox, and trucks are not cheap to cover. The average full coverage premium on a pickup in 2026 runs close to $3,000 a year, and the bigger, heavier, pricier models climb well past that. The electric trucks, the ones people buy partly to save on fuel, are some of the most expensive things on the road to insure, with premiums north of $4,000 a year, because the parts are specialized and a fender bender becomes a 5-figure repair. Why so much across the board? Because insurance prices 2 things: the odds you'll file a claim and the cost when you do. A truck is expensive to repair, expensive to replace, heavy enough to do serious damage in a collision, and absolutely packed with cameras and sensors and screens that cost a small fortune to fix the moment a deer steps into the road and disagrees with your front bumper. So somewhere around $250 a month, give or take, simply disappears into a policy you spend your whole life hoping you never have to use. And like the fuel, it never stops, and it rarely goes down. It renews every 6 months, usually a little higher than the time before, for as long as the truck sits in your name. Now, this is the exact moment where a truck defender raises a hand and says, "Sure, but everybody knows trucks hold their value." That's the trump card. And here's where I have to gently take something away from you, because that one belief is doing more financial damage than almost anything else we've covered. It is true that trucks depreciate a little slower than the average car, but slower is not the same thing as slow, and the percentage is hiding the real wound from you. A typical full-size pickup loses somewhere around 40% of its value over its first 5 years. The most popular models, the F-150, the Silverado, the Sierra, all land right in that neighborhood, and a few do meaningfully worse. 40% doesn't sound like a catastrophe until you remember what it's 40% of. 40% of a $40,000 car is $16,000. 40% of a $66,000 truck is more than $26,000. So yes, technically, the truck held its value better as a percentage, and it still quietly evaporated over $26,000 of your money while it sat in the driveway doing nothing but losing weight. The bigger the price you start at, the bigger the dollar loss, even when the percentage on the chart looks reassuring. That right there is the kind of number that makes accountants wince. People treat depreciation like it doesn't count, like it isn't real, because no one ever mails you a bill for it, but you pay every cent of it, all at once, the day you sell or trade. It's the brutal gap between what you still owe and what a buyer will actually hand you. And on a truck, that gap opens wide and it opens early. The first owner eats the steepest part of that loss, which is precisely why a smart used truck buyer can scoop up a 3-year-old pickup for tens of thousands less than the original owner paid. You're not avoiding the depreciation when you buy new. You're volunteering to be the person who pays for all of it. Read it as a bill you will absolutely receive someday. It's just post-dated, and it's bigger than you think. And here's where these costs stop being separate and start compounding into each other in a way that really traps people: the maintenance. For the first few years, a new truck is genuinely cheap to keep running. Oil, filters, an air filter, the occasional tire rotation. And that early stretch of calm is exactly what convinces you that the truck was a smart, durable, sensible decision after all. See, nothing's gone wrong. That calm does not last. On most vehicles, the expensive repairs start showing up around years 7 and 8. And now remember what we just learned about loan terms. A huge share of people are writing 7-year loans. So the major repairs and the final loan payments are scheduled to arrive at the same kitchen table at the same time, right as the factory warranty stands up, waves goodbye, and walks out the door. You get to pay for the breakdown and the loan in the same month. And trucks tack on their own special tax that cars simply don't have. Those big, aggressive, knobby tires that look so good in the driveway. A full set for a full-size pickup can run well over $1,000, and far more than that on the lifted, oversized setups people love. And they tend to wear out faster than ordinary car tires. The bigger the truck, the bigger the brakes, the bigger the parts, the bigger every single repair invoice for the rest of that vehicle's life. You didn't just buy a more expensive vehicle, you bought a more expensive everything, permanently, all the way down to the rubber. So let's actually total it. Take an honest, all-in look at a used truck over 5 years. The cheaper path, the supposedly responsible one. Interest on the loan? A couple thousand. Insurance? Around $1,500 a year, so $7,500 over 5 years. Fuel? Easily $2,000 to $3,000 a year. Call it $12,000 over 5 years. Routine maintenance? Several thousand more. And then the unscheduled repairs, the ones nobody plans for, which on a used truck can run anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 across those 5 years. Add it all up, and even the budget-friendly used truck quietly costs you well into the tens of thousands of dollars just to sit in your life for 5 years. Now circle back to the new truck, the $66,000 one, with the stretched payment and the steeper depreciation and the bigger fuel bill, and the all-in cost climbs higher still. Put a real number on it. At $1,200 to $1,600 a month, all in, you're spending somewhere between roughly $70,000 and $96,000 over 5 years to keep one full-size truck in your life. Read that again slowly. You could spend the price of a second truck just operating the first one. And at the end of those 5 years, you don't own a paid-off asset that holds steady. You own a depreciating machine that's worth a fraction of what you've poured into it, with the expensive repair years now arriving. Take a breath here, because we've stacked up a lot of bills, and now I have to show you the strangest part of this entire story. The part where the whole thing quietly stops making sense on paper. Everything we just walked through, the price, the payment, the fuel, the insurance, the depreciation, the tires, every dollar of it gets justified by one single word: capability. You can look yourself in the mirror and say it's worth it because a truck can tow and haul and work and go anywhere a road gives out. You're paying for what it can do. So let's quietly look at what people actually do with them, because the data here is genuinely hard to believe. A vehicle research firm that surveys hundreds of thousands of buyers every year found that nearly 90% of truck owners never use their truck for actual work. Not as a job site vehicle, not for business towing, not as a mobile office, not once. And it only gets more specific from there. Roughly 75% of truck owners tow something once a year or less, which for most of them means never. Around 70% go off-road once a year or less. And even hauling, just dropping something heavy in the bed, the literal entire reason the bed exists. Around a third of owners do that once a year or less. One widely cited study of F-150 owners found nearly two-thirds of them rarely or never tow anything, and about a third rarely or never haul a single thing in the bed. So what on earth are people doing in these enormous, thirsty, expensive machines? Commuting, running errands, school pickup, driving around for the pure pleasure of it. Researchers found that more than half of truck owners use the thing mostly for the daily commute, and a large share drive it purely for enjoyment every single week. And when you add it all together, you land on a genuinely wild conclusion. Just over 1 in 10 trucks on the road today is never used as a truck at all. Not once, not for anything. It's a very heavy, very thirsty, very expensive way to carry one person and a coffee to an office and back. That, right there, is the Pavement Princess. A truck dressed head to toe for the mountains and the worksite that has never seen either one. All-terrain tires that have only ever gripped a smooth parking lot. A towing package that has never been hitched to anything. A bed lined and protected for cargo that has hauled nothing heavier than a few grocery bags and that one bag of mulch you bought a year ago and still bring up at parties. You are paying full freight for a capability you essentially never touch, and that untouched capability is the entire excuse for the price. Somebody once said it perfectly. A lot of people aren't buying a truck, they're buying a cowboy costume. And the costume costs a fortune, billed monthly for years, long after the novelty of sitting up high in traffic has completely worn off. If you're getting something out of this, do me one quick favor and tell me down in the comments what you currently drive and what you secretly wish you drove instead. I actually read those, and they tell me exactly what to break down next. Now let me pull back and show you the one cost that makes every single number we've talked about so far look small. Step all the way back from any single bill and look at the entire picture at once. Add up the stretched payment, the fuel, the insurance, the maintenance, and the slow, steady bleed of depreciation, and the honest, all-in monthly cost of a new full-size truck very often lands somewhere between $1,200 and $1,600 a month, once you finally stop pretending the payment is the only number that matters. Independent research that bothers to track the costs beyond the loan, the fuel and the insurance and the repairs and the taxes finds drivers spending hundreds of dollars every month on top of whatever they hand the bank. The payment was never the cost. The payment was just the slice of the cost you were allowed to see clearly. Everything else came in through the side door. So here's the question that actually matters, the one this entire channel is built around. Not what does the truck cost? What does that money become if it doesn't go into a truck? Let me introduce you to two people. Same town, same job title, the same paycheck landing in their accounts every 2 weeks. We'll call them Marcus and Danny. The only meaningful difference between these two human beings is what's parked outside their front door. Marcus bought the truck, new, average price, with the stretched 7-year loan and the fuel and the full coverage insurance. His all-in cost of simply getting himself around town sits at roughly $1,400 a month, and it's going to sit there for years. Danny looked at the exact same paycheck and made a much quieter choice. She bought a reliable used vehicle, something sensible and safe and unremarkable, paid it off in a few years, and her total all-in cost of getting around town runs closer to $500 a month. Same income, same commute. Two completely opposite decisions inside one single category of spending. And here's what matters. Danny is not depriving herself of anything. She is not eating ramen in the dark to save a buck. She drives a perfectly nice, perfectly comfortable, perfectly safe car that gets her everywhere she needs to go. She has simply, flatly refused to spend $1,400 a month on the act of moving her own body around her own town. So every month, Danny has roughly $900 sitting in her account that Marcus does not have. And here's the part that Marcus will never once see or feel, because it never, ever shows up as a loss on any statement he'll ever receive. Danny takes that $900 a month, puts it into a simple, boring index fund, and then does the hardest thing in all of investing. She leaves it completely alone. Now let me show you what that quiet decision actually does. Using a rule of thumb this channel comes back to again and again because it's the closest thing to magic that real finance offers. It's called the Rule of 72. Divide 72 by your rate of return, and you get the rough number of years it takes your money to double. At the kind of returns the broad market has delivered historically, money invested and left alone roughly doubles itself about every 7 to 10 years, entirely on its own, while you sleep, while you work, while you forget it's even there. So Danny's $900 monthly gap, the simple difference between owning a truck and owning a sensible car, doesn't just sit there. It compounds. Over a single decade, that gap isn't $900, and it isn't even the 100+ thousand she actually put in. With growth stacked on top, it's well over $150,000. And over a full working career, the gap between Marcus and Danny stops being a vehicle at all. It becomes the difference between retiring with real comfort and dignity and never quite being able to retire at all. That is the cost that nobody, anywhere, prints on the window sticker. Marcus didn't merely spend more money on a nicer truck. He quietly handed away the entire future version of himself that the very same money could have built, brick by brick, month by month. And here's the genuinely cruel part of it. He can't even feel the loss while it's happening, because you never miss the wealth you simply failed to create. There's no alarm, there's no overdraft notice, there's no dramatic moment. There's just a quieter, smaller, more stressful retirement waiting decades down the road. And if you trace it all the way back, it leads to a decision that felt completely reasonable on a dealership lot on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The decision seemed small at the time. It was the opposite of small. Which brings us to the question hiding underneath this entire video. If the math is this lopsided, if most owners genuinely never use the capability, if the same money could have quietly built a small fortune, then why on earth do we keep buying them? And the honest answer has almost nothing to do with towing. When researchers actually ask people why they choose trucks they never use as trucks, the answer that keeps rising to the surface is image. A truck says something about you, out loud, to everyone who sees it. It says capable, independent, hardworking, rugged, ready for anything. The kind of person who could throw a kayak and a tent in the back and vanish into the mountains on a whim, even if that person realistically spends every single weekend at the exact same grocery store you do. You are not buying a tool. You are buying a feeling about yourself and a story you'd like other people to quietly believe about you. And look, there's nothing evil about that. We all want to feel like a certain kind of person. We all perform a little. The problem isn't the wanting. The problem is the price tag on this particular costume. Most identities you can buy at a store for a few $100s. This one quietly costs you well over $100,000 of future wealth, and you wear it to pick up milk. And once you can see that clearly, once you can really see it, the way out becomes obvious. And honestly, it's a lot less painful than you're probably bracing for. Because I am not here to tell you that you can never own a truck. Let me be completely clear about that. If you genuinely tow a trailer most weekends, if you run a real business out of that bed, if you live somewhere the pavement ends and the dirt and the mud begin, then a truck isn't a trap at all. It's a tool, and good tools are absolutely worth paying for. This entire breakdown was never, ever about the vehicle itself. It was about buying enormous capability you are never once going to touch, and then financing your own self-image at $1,400 a month for 7 straight years. So here is the actual way through it, step by step. First, get brutally honest with yourself about how you really use a vehicle, not how you picture using it on your best, most adventurous, most outdoorsy imaginary day. If you tow exactly once a year, you do not need a truck. You need a sensible car and a $40 trailer rental on the one weekend you actually move a couch. Renting capability for the rare day you need it is one of the smartest money moves almost nobody makes. Second, if you genuinely do want a truck, understand that a cheaper, smaller one already exists and does almost everything that most people actually need a truck to do. The compact pickups on the market start tens of thousands of dollars below the full-size average, sip fuel where the big ones guzzle it, and still have a real bed in the back. You can have the truck and skip the worst of the trap entirely. Third, and this one matters no matter what you buy, respect the old rule that has quietly saved more people than any budgeting app ever invented. Put at least 20% down, finance it for no longer than 4 years, and keep your total vehicle costs, all of them, under 10% of your take-home income. If a vehicle simply cannot fit inside that box, then the honest, unglamorous truth is that you can't actually afford that vehicle yet, no matter how good it would look sitting in your driveway tomorrow morning. And here's one last move that quietly beats almost everything else. Let somebody else eat the depreciation for you. Remember how the steepest part of the loss happens in those first few years, while the original owner takes the hit? You can simply be the second owner. A well-kept 3-year-old truck can sell for tens of thousands less than it costs new, with most of its useful life still ahead of it and the worst of the value cliff already behind it. You get nearly the same vehicle, and you skip the most expensive years of owning it. By the way, none of this is really about trucks alone. The exact same trap is parked all over the country wearing a different shape. The giant 3-row luxury SUV, the loaded German sedan, anything big and shiny bought on a stretched loan to project a life you're actually still financing. The vehicle changes, the math never does. And maybe that's the real shift I want you to carry out of here with you. The genuinely wealthy are almost never the ones with the biggest, loudest trucks. Drive slowly through a truly wealthy older neighborhood sometime and count the lifted, fully loaded, brand new pickups parked out front. You will not find many. The flashiest trucks, the ones with the chrome and the lift kit and the temporary tags, tend to sit in the driveways of the people stretching the absolute hardest to look like they've already made it. The quiet, real money is almost always parked in the paid-off, sensible, slightly boring car, with the difference working silently and patiently in an index fund somewhere, building something that will still be standing long after the truck has rusted out and the last payment has finally cleared. It was never about the truck. It was about which one of those two people you quietly decide to become. So go back to that stack of bank statements sitting on your passenger seat. The one you've been avoiding for 3 months. Open it. Actually open it. Add up every single dollar this vehicle truly costs you in a month. All of it. Not just the comfortable payment you've made peace with. The fuel, the insurance, the repairs, the depreciation you can't see but are paying anyway. Then ask yourself the question off that gas receipt one final time, and answer it honestly this time. Is it worth it? For some of you, the answer is going to be a clear and peaceful yes, and now you know exactly what you're paying for, and you can drive that thing with a completely clear conscience. But for a lot of you, the answer is going to sting a little, and I want you to know that the sting is the single most valuable thing you will take away from this entire video. Because that sting is the precise moment the quiet draining finally becomes loud enough for you to actually hear it. And you cannot fix what you refuse to hear. Now, here's what I want to leave you with, because everything we covered today, the payment math, the depreciation, the opportunity cost, the compounding, all of it rests on a single foundation. And if that foundation isn't already in place, then fixing the truck alone won't fix anything, because the next expensive mistake is already quietly lining up in the driveway right behind it. None of this works. None of it sticks, unless you genuinely understand the basic mechanics underneath it all. How money grows when you leave it alone, how debt drains it when you don't, and how a string of small, ordinary monthly decisions silently compounds into the entire shape and size of your life. That's the groundwork that everything else gets built on top of. I put together a full video that lays exactly that foundation, all the way from the ground up. And it's the one that turns everything we just talked about from merely interesting into something you can actually go do. It's the real first step of any finance journey, the one that lets you see the expensive mistakes coming and step around them, instead of spending the next decade cleaning them up. It's waiting for you right now, and it's honestly the exact place I'd tell you to start.